Hey, welcome to Anime What Ifs. This is part 11 of What If Naruto Married Temari. Tell me, Uchiha-san, do you still seek power? For Sasuke, the words seemed to ring through the room and he activated his Sharingan in a brief search for Genjutsu. Seeing everything was normal, he deactivated his eyes and stared at his guest. I've been removed from the Shinobi Corps and also crippled. Why would you come ask me if I seek power? Danzo considered the boy. He was flawed, but with training and molding, he could be great. I am no longer an active shinobi, and I too have been crippled. Do you think I have no power? Now that Sasuke was on the council, he had seen the man there, but had never seen him before. Given the facts as he knew them, Danzo was obviously someone that worked from the shadows. Perhaps he could be of use. No, I have seen you at the council sessions. I believe you probably hold some sort of position of power that requires you to hide it. Very astute, Danzo said with a nod. Everyone looks to the visible figures of the village, the Hokage, the Jonin, but not everything a village does is meant to be seen. And you mean to give me this power? Sasuke asked skeptically. You mistake me, Uchiha-san. I am not giving you anything, Danzo replied. I'm merely offering to show you a path that would lead you to the power you seek. If you should prove worthy, of course. Sasuke gritted his teeth as Danzo shot hit home. Of course he was worthy, he was the last loyal Uchiha. With other paths close to him, he would do whatever this man required for the power he was offering. I am ready for any tests you may have, Danzo-san. He replied with an edge of anger. Danzo regarded him impassively. No, you are not. Not yet. The first thing you must learn is that emotions are a weapon. Your anger and rage drive you to weakness. Weakness Konoha cannot afford. What would you suggest then, Danzo-san? Sasuke growled out. I will tell you some truths, let me see how you handle them. I am aware that you hate the Uzumaki boy for crippling you, but he is not to blame. You are. Sasuke exploded. How is the dobe not to blame? He blew off my arm. Yes, he did. What caused him to do it though, Uchiha-san? Who drew upon their curse seal and used an assassination jutsu against another Leaf Nin? As I said, emotions are a weapon. You let your anger take control in that match and now you must pay the price for it. Danzo's response caused Sasuke to reconsider the events of the match. He still crippled me. Yes, he did, but he could have killed you. Had you done such a thing against me, I would have killed you? His compassion allowed you to live. Yet another reason emotions are a weapon. The Uzumaki boy fails to control his emotions and allowed someone that tried to kill him to live. A potentially fatal mistake on the battlefield. Sasuke considered the man's words. They made sense to him, but he lived on his hatred. What was he to do without it? Still, if it was required for power, he would control his emotions. Danzo watched the lesson sink in and the corner of his mouth twitched in approval. Good. You are beginning to learn. You must not allow your emotions to control your actions. This leads to the second truth, Uzumaki will someday be Hokage. Now Sasuke was shocked. The dobe had always spouted his determination to be Hokage, but Sasuke had always assumed it was simply his way of drawing attention to himself. Now a high-ranking member of the village was telling him that Naruto would be Hokage. I see this shocks you, and for that you can only blame yourself. Taking your emotions out of it, I want you to think about Uzumaki being Hokage. Sasuke narrowed his eyes as he began reviewing what he knew of Naruto now. Several pieces he had previously ignored demanded his attention. He is the son of the Yondaime, and is related to the Shodai, Nadaime and Godaime Hokage. Danzo nodded his approval as Sasuke began to speak. Once the boy began to clearly look at the situation, he had an excellent mind. He will be powerful almost beyond belief provided he is trained correctly. Sasuke continued, unaware of Danzo's thoughts. With his heritage and the Kyubi to call on, he will be almost unstoppable. His marriage would tie Tsunegakure to Konoha if he was Hokage, even more than it does now. Sasuke paused and looked at Danzo again. Yes, I can see it. The Dobe will someday become Hokage. I shudder when I think of him in that spot though. Danzo nodded again. Yes, Uzumaki is a firm believer in the teachings of the Sandaime Hokage. Such teachings lead to weakness for the village, no matter how powerful the individual. Now, what would you suggest in regards to this information? Sasuke placed his good hand under his chin as he began to consider the question. Obviously there would need to be some sort of check or voice of reason. Someone able to do what needed to be done. The Hokage is the military commander, but most village functions are controlled from the council. Only in times of war is the Hokage absolute. I see. He trailed off, realizing what Danzo was subtly suggesting. Tell me, Uchiha-san, what do you see? Danzo said, carefully watching the boy. I would need to fill that role. I have the support of the civilians of the village, and while useful does not get me what I need. I will have to form some sort of alliance with other members of the council to ensure that the Dobe has someone opposing his actions. Sasuke smirked at the bandaged man. That was your role, but why come to me now? Danzo considered what to tell the boy. Perhaps some measure of the truth would be needed here. I have always sought the position of Hokage, to make the hard choices the Sandaime never would. I can see events in motion and I know that I will never attain that post now that Uzumaki's heritage has been revealed. It now falls to me to ensure that the adherents of the will of fire, as the Sandaime was fond of calling his teachings, never completely control the village. They would strip Konoha's power and bargain it away in the name of peace. He nearly spat the last word out despite his emotional control. Sasuke leaned forward, briefly flaring his Sharingan in excitement. I see, and so while the Dobe is being taught, you will teach me? Perhaps. Danzo replied as he stood and shuffled to the door. You will need to show me that you are worthy before I will commit to anything. He paused at the door and said over his shoulder. It has come to my attention that the Hokage will be training several young kunoichi in her medical arts. I have heard that the Uzumaki's wife may be there as well. A shinobi uses every tool at their disposal, Uchiha-san. Perhaps you should consider that. I will be watching you, show me you are worthy. Having said his piece, Danzo gave a curt bow and exited the room. Sasuke sat back in his chair and considered new options for the future. Danzo may not be able to become Hokage, but perhaps he could take the Dobe's dream away. It would be only fair after Uzumaki took his away. He would play along with Danzo and form his own power base. Sakura, he called out. Come here, I need to speak with you. Sakura answered his call and walked into the room. Yes, Sasuke-kun? She asked quizzically. Sasuke took a moment to observe his wife. As it stood, she was useless for anything but breeding stock. The only reason he married her was that she was the only kunoichi willing to do so after the events with the Dobe. Given another choice, possibly any other choice, he would never have married her, but perhaps she could actually be useful. He forced to smile as he told her about the medical training. Elder Danzo informed me that the Hokage is beginning classes for kunoichi in the medical arts. I think that this would be a wonderful opportunity for us and I would like you to attend. Really? Sakura clapped her hands in glee. Training with the Hokage to be a mednin? I promise you, Sasuke-kun, I won't disappoint you. See that you don't, you represent the Uchiha clan. Sasuke said, dismissing her and turning to stare out the window. Even Sasuke's cold demeanor couldn't shake her from her excitement as she left the room. Maybe if she excelled as a mednin things would get better here at home. At least the training would get her out of the house. She missed her friends. After testing the water with her toe, Temari sank into the onsen with a groan. Jiraiya had been correct, the barrier had disappeared after a few hours. After waking the man, they'd had to drag Inoichi, Naruto and Reynard back to the village when they couldn't get any of the three to wake up. She had ended up carrying Reynard, who was surprisingly heavy for his small body size. Jiraiya had been stuck with Inoichi and Naruto, and she giggled as she remembered the man swinging the two onto his shoulders. The Toad Sage had not been pleased at carrying two men, and the look on his face when Temari asked him what his intentions for her husband were was hilarious. She hummed happily to herself as she felt the hot water ease the pains caused by the fight with Naruto. She found it odd that the nicest, sweetest boy she had ever met had an unstoppable rage demon imprisoned within him. I suppose it's for the best, she mused. I'd hate to think of what would have happened if someone like the Uchiha had that sort of creature inside them. She supposed it was his general good nature that helped keep the beast in check, but even that could be overwhelmed, she supposed. Naruto, not her Naruto, but still Naruto had almost killed her today. She was extremely fortunate that her Naruto had somehow stopped the other one from killing her. She idly stroked her still flat stomach, a habit she'd acquired sometime during the past week. Aside from not wanting to die, I really don't think I want to know how Naruto would have reacted when he learned he killed me. Perhaps I shouldn't have been inside the barrier. The sound of the gate leading to the garden opening caused Temari to snap her head up, but she relaxed when she saw Ino walk in wrapped up in a towel. Ino? What are you doing here? Sliding into the water, Ino took a moment to relax before she answered. Well, tonight is the last night for me here. The garden is done, so tomorrow I go back home. She looked around a little wistfully. I figured I would take one last soak beforehand though. Temari nodded. Being from the desert, she could appreciate someone wanting to enjoy the onsen one last time. Sure, there were public ones, but they were public and Jiraiya was still in town. She'd heard of the man's habits from her husband, which was why she convinced some of the resident foxes to keep an eye out while she soaked. Jiraiya had tried to peek only once, and she giggled again as she remembered watching the man run off chased by small woodland creatures. Something funny? Ino asked when Temari couldn't stop giggling. Temari waved a hand in a brushing motion. No, just remembering why I really like having a private onsen. Ino tilted her head, then smirked. Oh, Jiraiya, right? Yeah, I saw that. One of the strongest shinobi alive being run off by foxes. She leaned forward and whispered. Just between us, when I saw that, I took control of one of the foxes just so I could bite him. Temari laughed uproariously at the information, and Ino sank back into the water with a satisfied smile. So, you going to come train with us? She asked Temari. Temari stopped laughing and sighed. I think so. She absently stroked her stomach, a gesture not missed by Ino, and continued. I'm not going to be able to train like I want soon, and Ero-sennin made some good points about why I should. Ino laughed. Oh Kami, now Naruto has you calling him that? Temari smirked. Trust me, I have my reasons. I even tossed him over a cliff earlier today when he was being perverted. Ino's eyes widened and she clapped her hands over her mouth. No way. You threw him off a cliff? Temari's smirk widened. You would be amazed at the things you can do with wind. The two girls laughed for a while, then settled down to enjoy the water. I'm going to miss you guys, Ino said after a few minutes. Temari eyed her curiously. It's not like you won't see us around. Ino closed her eyes and floated in the water. I know, but the last couple weeks here with you guys have been really fun. She chuckled. I won't spoil the surprise, but he made something for you in the garden I think you'll really like. I never would have guessed that Naruto could be that romantic. Temari arched an eyebrow. Oh? What did he do? Ino stuck out her tongue playfully. I'm not ruining the surprise, but I will say that I'm really kinda jealous. Temari snorted. Jealous? I was married off to another village for political reasons. I didn't even know who the groom was before I got here. Then, no one knew that I had never been taught the contraceptive jutsu since I was on a team with my brothers and I get freaking pregnant on my wedding night. The only thing I feel lucky about in the situation is that at least my husband is a really good guy, but even then he has a freaking demon sealed in him. Ino stared wide-eyed as Temari wound down from her rant. Wow, when you put it like that, I don't really know what to say. Temari grinned. Ah, that felt good to let out. Don't get me wrong, though. Everything I just said is true, but I'm actually pretty happy right now. Ino stretched her arms out and formed a triangle with her fingers. She stared through the hole at the stars as she responded. I'm still jealous, you know. We all thought that Sasuke was Prince Charming when we were growing up. He was just so dark and mysterious, and all of us girls thought we could just take him and fix him and then he would be our knight in shining armor. Both girls chuckled at the image of Sasuke wearing shining armor. The image was just a droll. Then it comes out that the boy we all thought was stupid and weak is really the tragic prince of the play, desperately searching for love, and you come out of nowhere and claim him. Temari crossed her arms and gave Ino a stern look. You all had your chance, but no one bothered to really see him. Even I vastly underestimated him when I first met him. I make no apologies for my good fortune. No, I wouldn't either in your place. Ino sighed. I just wish I had someone that cared for me the way I've seen him care for you. I suppose it's every girl's dream, huh? Temari replied. Who knows, Ino, maybe someday your prince will come. After finishing her soak and her chat with Ino, Temari padded back into the house to check up on Naruto. Temari had tucked him into bed after Jiraiya had dropped him off before leaving to take Inoichi home. She was concerned when entering the bedroom. She saw no sign of her husband. She closed her eyes and concentrated, feeling his chakra nearby. At least he is still in the house. Following the trail, she found him intently studying a scroll in his father's old study. Looking around, she noticed a half-dozen clones also sitting reading scrolls as well. Before she had time to say something, the Naruto at the desk she assumed was the real one began furiously scribbling on a scroll. Silently, she crossed the room to see him working on what appeared to be a very complicated seal. So intent on his work he never noticed her presence. He jerked in alarm when Temari gently touched his shoulder. His flailing knocked the ink pot over and ruined the seal he'd been working on. Cursing under his breath, Naruto began trying to clean up the mess, but mostly just smeared ink over everything. Temari watched his actions with a certain amount of alarm. Usually he would greet her, no matter how short the time then had been apart was. Now he was refusing to even look at her, and she knew that something was very wrong. Temari was many things: smart, beautiful, strong, proud, and rather blunt. She spun the chair Naruto was sitting in to face her and planted her arms on the armrests on both sides, trapping him in the chair. Naruto, what's wrong? Naruto refused to meet her eyes, taking small glances and immediately looking away. Nothing, Temari-chan, he said with forced cheer. Just working on my Fuinjutsu. Temari narrowed her eyes and her expression became stern. Naruto, look at me. When he refused to turn his head to face her, she removed one of her hands from the chair and forced him to meet her eyes. This isn't nothing. I know nothing happens to be a good friend of mine, and this isn't it. She was trying to both get his attention and lighten the atmosphere with her small joke. I broke my promise. Naruto muttered. I'm sorry, you did what? Temari asked with a great deal of confusion. Naruto crossed his arms and stared at her feet, but he did raise his voice. I broke my promise, Temari-chan. I swore I would protect you and I almost killed you today. I'm working on a seal for myself, something you can use on me if the fox screws with me again. Temari chewed on his answer. Yes, he had almost killed her, but it wasn't really him. She remembered her thoughts in the onsen. Her Naruto had saved her. Naruto, that's not true, you did protect me, she finally said. Naruto jerked his head up in surprise at her statement. He'd been expecting her to be very angry with him, possibly not want anything to do with him after what happened. I suppose I should stop assuming the worst, but before Temari-chan, it's all I knew. He paused, unsure what to say. I'm not sure what to say here. I know what happened. I was seeing everything in a red haze after the stunt the Fox team pulled, and I almost killed you. Temari leaned forward, touching her forehead to his. Naruto, you can't blame yourself for this. Yes, you went berserk when the Fox pushed his power into you, but you didn't actually harm any of us. You fought off the effects of his chakra before anything really happened. Naruto winced. Temari-chan, I saw where those claws were. If I had been even a second later, you would be dead, and I would be to blame. He paused and brought a hand up to cup her cheek softly. I don't think I could take losing you. Temari gently bopped him on the head. Naruto, you broke out of the Kyuubi's power when you saw I was threatened. I'm not afraid of you, and you're not going to lose me. Taking his hand from her chin, she placed it against her stomach. I'm also pretty sure this ties us together too. Naruto closed his eyes and focused on his hand. He wasn't a Mednin like Tsunade, of course, but underneath his hand, he could feel a faint chakra signature within Temari's. Yeah, he said huskily. I suppose it does. Temari was glad to see him recovering from his little bout of depression. Turning to the table, she guided the subject to something else. So, tell me about this seal. Naruto shrugged. I'm trying to create a suppression seal like what Erosenin used on me, but one that is permanent and can be used from a distance. I figure if I get it right, you'd always have a way to stop me if Kyuubi decides to be a team again, and he will. Temari stared at the seal in horror. Naruto, that's a really stupid idea. Naruto wasn't sure where that came from. Wouldn't you want a way to stop him if the worst happened? Temari sighed. Naruto, the idea of a suppression seal is great in theory, but what happens if an enemy learns how to trigger it? Naruto's eyes widened, he hadn't thought about that. He looked at the notes for the seal as his mind raced. She really had a point, and it would actually make anyone that knew how to trigger the seal into an even larger target if his enemies ever discovered it. Damn it, I didn't think of that. Temari giggled at his expression. And that, dear husband, is why you have me. Someone has to think of these things, and we both know it's not going to be you. She said with a teasing lilt to her voice. Naruto pouted. That's not very nice, Temari-chan. Temari laughed at him. I don't recall ever claiming to be nice, Naruto-kun. Naruto decided he wasn't going to win this argument, so he took the mature route of continuing to pout while ignoring the wide grin on his wife's face. Something about Temari's appearance had been bugging him since she got his attention, and it suddenly popped into head. Temari-chan, why are you wearing a robe? Temari glanced down and blinked. Oh, I was in the onsen earlier and I never got dressed after I came in to check on you and you weren't in bed. I guess I just forgot. Hey, that reminds me, Ino came in to use the onsen before she went back to her parents and she said you had a surprise for me in the garden. Naruto grumbled under his breath. She did she? I suppose I shouldn't have let her see it given her tendency to gossip. It's not like she told me what it was, Naruto-kun, just that it existed. Temari replied. Oh, so you haven't seen it yet? No, she said it was a surprise you had for me, so I resisted the urge to go look, but now I'm really curious. Well, Naruto said dryly. We can go see it, but you'll have to let me out of the chair first. Temari blushed when she realized she was still trapping him in the chair. She backed off to allow him to get up and took his offered hand as they headed out to the garden. She was confused when Naruto led her to a back corner that appeared to just be flowers. Naruto? Naruto flashed her a foxy grin. Kai. As he dispelled the genjutsu he had Ino use, the ordinary flower beds became something else entirely. Apparently he hadn't listened when she told him not to have Gaara turn part of the garden into something resembling the desert near Sunagakure, but she was now glad he hadn't. Divided from the garden by a low wall to hold the sand, Naruto and Gaara had somehow found the time to create something remarkably like an oasis. She wasn't sure how they had found the time as hectic as things had been, but she suspected massive abuse of shadow clones given the amount of work it looked to have been. Moving across the sand, relishing the feel of it on her bare feet, she entered the oasis to find a small gazebo surrounded by carefully cultivated flower beds of desert lilies, her favorite flower. Standing next to the gazebo was a life-size statue of her and her brothers standing next to each other in their battle poses. "Oh, Naruto," she whispered as she started to cry. "I don't know what to say, it's beautiful." Naruto smiled as he pulled her into a hug. "I wanted you to have a part of the garden that was all yours. I'll have clones come in to tend to the flowers from time to time, but otherwise, this is your sanctuary." Resting her chin on his shoulder, a somewhat uncomfortable position given her height advantage, she pointed at the statue. "Naruto, what is that? Or rather, how did you do that?" Naruto chuckled as he explained. "I'm not sure if you know this, but apparently Gaara has taken up a hobby to occupy himself since he can't sleep. I guess he goes out into the desert at night and uses his sand to make sculptures of things. As you can see, he's actually pretty good." Temari pulled out of the hug to go run her hand along the statue of herself. "Yeah, this is really good." She looked over at him when Naruto started to laugh. "What's so funny?" "Oh, you missed the best part of this. Kankuro managed to stop me and Gaara when we started painting the face of his statue purple. Gaara just turns to him and goes, "Nisan, we just wish to accurately portray your makeup for Temari." Temari began to giggle as she pictured Gaara telling Kankuro that in his usual monotone and found it to be hilarious. Yeah, it was hilarious. Kankuro couldn't tell if he should be shocked that Gaara was making a joke or pissed that he was calling it makeup. Still giggling, Temari sat down in the gazebo and watched the reflection of the stars in the water of the faux oasis. The fragrance of the flowers drifted in the wind, and if she closed her eyes she could almost imagine she was back in Sunagakure. Not quite, but it was close enough. While Temari was enjoying herself in the gazebo, Naruto received a visitor. A small toad wearing goggles of all things, approached him and spit a scroll out at his feet. Opening it, he was far from shocked to see it was from Jiraiya. It was delivered by a toad after all. Temari popped her head over his shoulder to read it as Naruto frowned. "Oh, he wants you to start training tomorrow, huh?" "Yeah," he replied. "I'm a bit worried. Erosenin said to meet him back at the barrier seal and I think he wants me to use Kyuubi's chakra." Temari shrugged. "I wouldn't be surprised. You are a Jinchuriki, after all." Naruto gave her a level look. "Temari-chan, I don't want to use Furball's power. If my mother and father could become S and SS rank ninja without using Fuzzball, I want to do so as well." "Naruto, that's a rather naive way to think of it," Temari replied after a short pause. "No," Naruto said firmly. "I know that I'll have to use its power at some point, but the stronger I am, the more powerful I'll be when I have to use it." Temari wasn't sure she agreed. He needed to learn how to control himself while using the chakra but decided that could be an issue for another day. Taking his hand, she began to lead him back to the house. "It's getting late. We should go to bed." Naruto nodded and enjoyed the warmth of her hand as they strolled through the garden. He cheerfully waved at the handful of kitsune that popped out to watch the two teens pass by. He was pleased to see that despite the cruel treatment their kind had endured, none of them seemed to be afraid of Temari or him. Entering the house, Temari dropped her hand from Naruto's and turned back to him. With a sly smile, she allowed her robe to slide off, revealing her nude figure. Naruto gulped and tried to keep his eyes on her face but was rapidly losing that fight. "Temari-chan?" Temari swayed closer to him and whispered huskily in his ear, "I said we should go to bed, I didn't say we should go to sleep." Naruto smiled as his wife took his hand and led him to the bedroom. This being married thing had its perks. Hope you liked this episode. The next one is coming soon.